Hey, everybody, there's a writer's strike happening in Hollywood, and we're going to bring someone on to talk about it. Neil Casey's an actor, writer, comedian who served as a writer on Saturday Night Live from 2012 to 2013, and Inside Amy Schumer in 2014, receiving an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Writing for a variety series for both shows. As an actor, he was a series regular on the comedies Other Space and Making History, and he also appeared in the 2016 reboot of Ghostbusters. Please welcome to the show, Neil Casey. Hey, Neil.
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
Neil, it's good you came because I screwed up trying to explain this strike real bad on Friday.
So
Where'd you go wrong?
So let me just show you this. I'm going to show you a few paragraphs from this article, and then I'll bring you in because this person's making the point that this writer strike isn't just for writers, that it's actually for everybody, and that they're trying to split people against the writers, trying to make it look like the writers are the elite. And so here's what he says. Some screenwriters are rich, but the average screenwriter is, like many people, just trying to hang on to a solid middle-class job. Their industry has been upended by technological changes like streaming. The old ad-centric revenue model is dying, and the writers are trying to win a contract that reflects the current reality of the business. They're not looking for Shangri-La. Their contract demands are fair pay and health care and a pension, while the companies are trying to take advantage of the changing industry to morph screenwriting into a more part-time, disposable, cheaper form of a gig work. Bosses would like those of us with worse pay and benefits to be jealous of these screenwriters. In fact, they are champions of the idea that jobs should not suck. That if you are making a ton of money for your bosses, then you should be getting a fair piece yourself. That was once called the American dream. Now it's called unreasonable demands. Either way, labor unions are the only remaining way to get it. This strike matters for everyone. The story of the past half century of American society has been this: declining labor, rising corporate power, rising inequality, collapsing democratic institutions. So reviving the power of working people through organized labor is the key to stopping our big natural plummet to hell. A profitable, high-profile industry with enough union density to actually have a fair fight between workers and employers? This is an uncommon and precious thing. The Writers Guild has it. They are fighting to show that humans who create stuff cannot always and everywhere be steamrolled by the demands of spreadsheets and stock markets. Their win will be meaningful to you and me and everyone whose job seems to always be becoming more of a grind. Well, let me bring in Neil Casey. First of all, your response to that.
I think that's absolutely right. You know, the writer strike and the way that the writer strike is going to give some leverage to the Directors Guild, who's sitting down with the Association of Producers this week on May 10th. The way it'll give SAG leverage when it's time for them to renew their contract. The way it works in Hollywood is that show business is a union industry, which means that the workers get a say, whether it's the above the line people like the directors, actors, and writers, but also the below the line IATSE unions and the Teamsters who stood with us in this fight that is that's just begun, but we're prepared to take it as long as it needs. But absolutely, it's sadly a rarity in the country today for strong unions to be able to stand up when people are trying to roll back their standard of living and even diminish gains that they fought for over the years. A big part of this fight is that they got to redefine television as streaming. So now we're fighting a lot of the same battles to not essentially accept rollbacks on battles that we thought we already won when TV was broadcast and even cable.
So let me explain to people. When a writer writes for a television show and then that television show airs, they get paid. But when it re-airs, they get paid again. It's called a residual. Actors get residual. Everybody gets residual, right? Because the company's making money, so they share the money with the people who produce that product that's making the money. So now that they're streaming, you don't know how many times it's being played, right? So they couldn't you know how many commercials are running on a rerun of Friends, you know it, right? But you don't know how many times someone's playing a Netflix thing so how do they compensate? So that was the big problem. And the last writer strike, they came up with some kind of formula that made everybody happy for this. But now that formula is being abused, is that what you're saying?
This fight is actually residuals are certainly a part of it, and the deal that we made with them to have them not have to share all of their data or only share some of their data with us in terms of viewership and things like that. I absolutely think that there's some malfeasance at the margins sometimes. There's also big problems with companies selling to themselves. Residual formulas were based on the idea that Sony's the studio that made the movie. They distributed it in the theaters, and now they're selling it to another platform. But if Netflix makes the movie and then sells it to itself, we already had to go in litigation for that. But the main issues of this strike are not it's not solely about residuals. I wouldn't even say it's mainly about residuals. It used to be the case 10 years ago that 30% of writers were making guild scale, which is essentially the minimum that the union negotiates of the minimum that somebody can be paid for an episode of television. And it varies between comedy, variety, episodic, television, and things like that. Now it's half. Now, it's half of the writers working in television are making union scale only, which means their agents didn't negotiate anything up from union scale, and the companies that are paying them are not essentially accepting the fact that experience deserves higher pay the way they used to. And some of that is shorter orders. Episodes of television are now 8 or 10, 12 instead of 20, 22 episodes of TV. But I've experienced it on both sides of the table. As a head writer when I'm hiring people, as a staff writer going in, they don't care that you've done this job 3 times, 5 times before, and that therefore you should go in and your quote should be a little higher. A lot of the times they go, well, if I'm the head writer, it's like, well, we can hire people at scale or no writers.
So well, wait a minute, because it's not clear to me, so it can't be clear to my audience. So what are you striking for? If it's not about residuals, what is the demand you're making?
It's really about base pay. The way that TV has gotten made, especially for streaming, a lot of the ways that people would make money just getting paid to do the job, not getting paid more after the fact, after things air, but just people's weekly pay has gone down. It used to be that 33% of people were making union minimum per week. Now it's half of people are making union minimum per week. So that's an effective rollback.
So when you negotiated the last contract, which was 10 or some years ago, 33% of writers made the minimum, but now it's increased to half the writers are making the minimum. And so you want to raise what the minimum is, because that's how the producers in the industry is kind of screwing writers by underpaying them, not paying them above minimum. And so you want to raise the minimum. And there's lots of other things happening, like it used to be that when you got a writing job in Hollywood, it was for 22 episodes, which is a long time. And now sometimes it's just for 8 or it's just for 10, stuff like that, right? And so so it's harder to make a living. And of course, when they're paying less, it's even harder on top of that. And so you want to raise the base pay. That's what this is?
Yes, and also we want to eliminate some of the loopholes that allow them to underpay writers for the same amount of work. They have something called mini rooms now. That's a big thing for our fight.
Yeah, explain people what mini rooms are. This is interesting.
So it used to be that you would get hired for a job, even if it was a 10-episode series, you would get hired to form the writer's room to write the show, and you would expect to be employed from shortly after the show was greenlit through the production of the show. Now with mini rooms, they'll hire a much smaller group of writers when the show hasn't even been greenlit, with a small script order, and they'll pay a smaller group of writers less money to write a lot more of the show than would have been true in the past. And it's a loophole, and it's one that we have to close by increasing the minimum number of weeks, or the expectation that writers will be hired to work on the show from the beginning through the process of production, and not allowing them to create an artificial divide between those two things that in essence has them paying less for the same amount of work. And one of the big problems now, I'm paraphrasing somebody on Twitter, and I can't quote them, but I wish I could, but it's every loophole is built into every contract now. So there used to be things at the margins in terms of working conditions, the amount of time you'd expect to work on a show, where occasionally, depending on who you're working for and what the show is, you'd say, oh, well, this week it's a short order. It's not a minimum number of weeks. We're working out of a conference room, et cetera, et cetera. There's no episode fees, things like that. And now a lot of those loopholes, things that you'd encounter sometimes, are the boilerplate for almost every contract. So we've got to get rid of them.
And so wasn't there also Tell me the idea of where they have you pitch a story idea, and they'll pay you for pitching, but then they'll only pay you if you continue if they pick up your pitch. Tell me about that idea.
So this is a big issue for screenwriters, but for television writers too, where it's a lot of free work. A very common story for screenwriters is that the studio will have acquired the rights to some IP, like an old toy or something like that, and then they will go out to a lot of different screenwriters, and you'll never know who, if you're on the receiving end of this offer to come in and pitch, you don't know if it's you or if it's you and 20 other people, and you come in and pitch your idea for some dinosaur toy that we played with 20 years ago, and you don't get paid for that. You get paid for the pitch, and then they say, well, we liked your pitch, but we have some notes. Please come back in. What would the movie actually be? And then you end up pitching them a treatment of a movie. Then there's more notes. Then you essentially get all the way up to the point where you've written a lot of done all the hard work of writing a movie, everything but writing the actual screenplay. It can take years as you're going up the chain at a studio. My friend Todd Alcott did a great post about this. I'd encourage people to look up. And you don't get paid for any of that. So we're also trying to close those loopholes where people are asked to do a lot of free work. They're not employees yet, but they end up working a lot of time and then never getting paid anything, sharing a lot of ideas up the chain. Another one that I think you may have been referencing is on Comedy Variety on streaming. There are no minimums because Comedy Variety on streaming is still treated like you're making YouTube videos.
Really?
Yes. So anytime you're negotiating as a Comedy Variety writer on streaming, you're negotiating up from zero instead of. So that's a big component of this as well. So then you get shows that are run in a bizarre way where people are getting paid day rates. They're getting paid, to pitch, but they just don't have the protections of minimums. Whereas there's a minimum number of weeks you're expected to work and a minimum amount that you're going to make that work that you or your representatives can negotiate up from based on your experience. But as a floor for people who are getting their first Comedy Variety writing job.
So basically, they just figured out a way to screw the writer at every turn in every different way since the last contract was signed. They figured out how to screw people over and put loopholes in. So now it's kind of a miserable job to be a writer and a struggle just to make a middle-class living. And what they're trying to do is make regular people and divide people, make us, these are, ivory tower rich people are bitching about not making enough money in Hollywood. And that's not the case at all.
Yeah, I don't have these figures handy, but the median working writer makes maybe a little more than the median salary in the U.S. for all labor, but as a white collar job, it's firmly in the middle. We do have a very good health plan, which we fought for. We have a good pension plan that we had to fight for, but the Writers Guild is not an ivory tower. It's not full of particularly wealthy people. It is as far as union jobs are concerned, we make a good living, or historically we've been able to make a good living, but we're always fighting for it, and they're always trying to roll us back to make us refight the same battles over and over again.
Kurt?
And even when.
This is a question I want to ask because friends of mine that have channels, in fact, a bunch of people, like you see how all the movies suck and the TV has gone downhill significantly. So all these people. Now, I blame the companies that do this, that purposely didn't hire qualified writers so they wouldn't have to pay them properly, like scabs ahead of time, okay? But what I've seen people say stuff like, well, they won't go broke. They made all this crap, and now the companies don't have enough money. They're losing money.
God.
And so they wrote crappy, now a lot of crap writing. I mean, it's easier than hire qualified people, I guess, but these companies aren't going broke at all, are they?
No, I mean, there may be some contractions. Some companies may go out of business, but the result of financial mismanagement or even greenlighting things that didn't work, that shouldn't fall on the writers, especially not the working writers' backs in terms of their salary and how much they make. But I mean, the problem is not that a lot of scab writers have been hired. I do think that.
No, I mean they weren't scabs. Like it's the quality of scabs before there's even a strike. They're like pre-scab. So they pay this money to writers. Then gradually all this DEI bullshit comes in. The quality goes down, right? And they go, hey, we could just always hire people that literally can't do the job, and it's a lot cheaper. And then the fans, then they encourage on Twitter, the writers and the fans. That's what all that Disney crap is, like the She-Hulk, the animosity between the writers' room and the fans.
Oh, really?
And they fight with each other. These decisions are bad decisions at the top. They're not the bad decisions of the underpaid idiot writer they have. So it's like they kind of must, I think, like, if they had to pay what they're supposed to pay, they would have to hire better writers. But I think they've gotten accustomed to using the excuse of, they got balls calling it equity and then having people do piecework like it's a Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
I know. Well, here's what. Go ahead.
I do think that a strategy from the studios and the people sitting on the other side of the table can be to introduce, culture war stuff into what is a pretty nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes sort of union negotiation, where we really are just talking about resisting what any union would resist, which is effective rollbacks on their compensation over any period of time. You don't go tell the union that they got to go make less than what they made 10 years ago because you found some little tricks. I also do think that whether it's the unions themselves or the companies, they can talk. I mean, not criticizing our unions, but like people can do a lot of talk about all these nice things that they're doing for, society at large or the climate or social justice and all that stuff. And a lot of that can be a smokescreen for not engaging with the real meat and potatoes issues of people making what they're worth and not accepting rollbacks on their compensation to what it was 10 years ago. But I would also in terms of the quality of the content that comes out, I do think that there is a tendency at the studios that they greenlight stuff that's based on IP, that's based on a reboot of a reboot, that's based on greenlighting something because the public already has some concept of it or recognizes it somehow, and they think that that's going to succeed, and that does choke out the chance for people who can actually pitch, develop, and write original work to get an opportunity to do that. Then I end up going in and pitching on a Hasbro toy from 25 years ago instead of pitching a movie I actually think would be good.
So I think it's important for people to realize that the writers, just like all people, they don't want to go on strike. That this is the last resort. This wasn't their first resort. This is the last resort. And as this guy says, no one wants this. No writer with an ounce of sense anyway. But the producers and the studios and the networks and the streamers gave us no choice. And so there they are. WGA members on strike set up a sunrise picket at Silver Cup East where they're supposed to be filming Daredevil, but members of the Teamster Local 817 and IATSE Locals 829 and 52 are refusing to cross the picket line. Fantastic. Look at that. No movie. Judd Apatow says studios may not want to quickly resolve writer's strike. They've probably been planning this for years. Huh. So they're going to use this like as a chance to break the writers union, you think, because they've been waiting for this? Studios move in to suspend TV overall deals amid WGA strike. So
Sure.
What does that mean?
There are writers who are hired for their exclusivity to work for studios, and the studios will often use this as an opportunity to clean house. If they're paying someone for their exclusivity and paying them to be available for work and they're not available for work, then they'll terminate or suspend their deals. And that's unfortunate for those people, but that's the type of sacrifice somebody who has an overall deal, I hope, would make for the future generations of writers to have a profession. And in terms of Mr. Apatow's comment, I'm a fan of Judd. I don't agree with him on that. I don't think that the people sitting across the table for us know what they're in for. We're absolutely resolved to getting a fair deal. We're not going to come crawling back. They are going to see how little they can make of television and movies without professional writers engaged in the process. Well, they'll find out.
The sub-headline here is, I think, encouraging for you. He says, Judd Apatow said that he also detailed the existential problem facing writers. Quote, no one else will be able to survive doing it. So he's on your side, it sounds like.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And I mean, he's like, I guess everybody's worried that the studios have some secret plan that they've come up with that's going to like render our strike less than effective. But I've seen no evidence of that. I think that they don't know how resolved we are, how grateful we are to the Teamsters, the members of IATSE on both coasts who won't cross our picket lines. We're ready for a long fight, and we're not going to give up until we get a fair deal.
Well, Neil, let me just say
studios.
the last time, Neil, there was a writer's strike, it cost $2 billion to California's economy. And I just want to ask you, selfish writers, are you aware what Zelensky could do with that kind of money? Okay, I have a compromise. Here's the deal: you give us a compensation for streaming, and we give you Conan back. How about that?
I'd love to see Conan back. Yeah.
Everything from late night talk shows to Marvel movies to SNL is being shut down by this strike, Neil. Boy, who do I have to fuck to make this go on forever? And by the way, ladies, if you walk the picket line, remember the old Hollywood axiom: don't sleep with the writer. They are much more reactionary than lefties, and they grab the check just about as often. Anyway, come on. Little writer humor. Come on, Kurt. Little writer humor.
So it is.
I'm thrilled that so many in Hollywood are supporting the workers, unless they work on the railroad. Because it's more important if your 104-degree fever doesn't interfere with your spell check than your stop signal. Because the people in Hollywood were okay with them crushing that.
Right,
they're
I got that
Democrats.
part.
You get the joke.
Not us. Not the Teamsters. Not the Guild. I wouldn't cross a picket line for any industry under any circumstances, now and forever, as God is my witness. The Hollywood unions will stand with any labor action in this country where people are trying to get a better deal to make a decent living for themselves and their families.
So I guess those late night writers who write for like Jimmy Kimmel and all those people and Stephen Colbert, they just didn't. They couldn't get their East Palestine jokes through. They couldn't get their pro railroad union jokes through. They just couldn't get them through, right?
I can't speak to that. If I were working late night, I'd be pitching them.
I know.
I'm sure they can't. I mean, as a job, I'm sure you can make them.
You can write them, but they're not going to. Yeah, they can write them, but they're not going to make it. No. All right, Neil Casey, I really appreciate you coming on to help explain what the writer's strike is all about. And it's not about what the people are seeing in the media. It's not about a bunch of effete, soft-handers.
It's designed to make you go, oh, I hate those stupid. And
It
for
is.
some reason, never look at the companies that
Right.
are in charge of this, that made these stupid decisions. And then they want you. That's why everybody fights on Twitter. They want you to hate each other.
They want you to hate each other. And believe me, if you looked up the salaries of the people who are the heads of these studios, I would bet you very few of them are less than $50 million a year. Very few of them. Many of them I know are over 100. I know that. So, like the guy who's just the Discover guy, like it's just amazing the money they make. And then they're screwing. Of course,
If they make something not good that you don't like, the person that should go is the exec that
You'd
makes that
think.
decision, not the.
you would think. Okay, Neil, thank you very much. We got to move on. I appreciate it, and good luck in your strike.
Thanks for having me. See you on the picket line.
Watch my new comedy special, COVID Lies Are Funny, for only $10. Become a member at jimmydore.com. Hey, and we're going to be on tour in Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, L.A., Bakersfield, Baltimore, Rosemont, Chicago, and a lot more. Oh, and San Francisco being added very soon. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. See you there.